This podcast is going to be a complete walkthrough of our time climbing the complete Exum route of the Grand Teton. By the end of it, you're going to be vastly more prepared to undertake it after listening to some of our blunders, but also the things that we did right, which was actually pretty much the whole route. We really didn't have any shenanigans, as Josh likes to call it. And things went pretty dang well, but there were some things that we would have changed too. So have fun, sit back, and get some beta for the Grand Teton. Josh is actually only about 10 feet away, but we couldn't figure out how to record this together without doing it on Google Meet. So that's where we're at right now. But yeah, dude, we're going to be talking about the frickin' full Exum, which, by the way, I didn't realize we were doing until like the day of, pretty much. Where Josh was like, oh yeah, we're doing the full Exum, not the lower Exum route. Why don't you go ahead and explain the difference between the two, actually?
Yeah, so I think what you were planning on doing is the upper Exum route, and we wanted to do the full. Austin and I wanted to do the full one. So the upper Exum is 6 pitches, just like the lower, and the upper is rated like, I think it's low 5th class up to 5.6. And then the lower Exum is 5.7 and more sustained 5.6 climbing, and a lot more exposure on the lower Exum as well. So it's definitely more serious. You have to pitch out everything on the lower Exum, whereas the upper Exum, you can do a lot of like soloing, a lot of short roping, a lot of simul climbing. Definitely a bigger objective and more serious.
So that comes out to, I don't know if you said it, but 12 total pitches of climbing versus 6 if you just did the upper.
Yeah, combined the two, we got 12 pitches total.
There's really 3 popular routes on the Teton, from my understanding, which would be Owen Spalding, commonly abbreviated as OS, and that is more scrambling. It sounds like more class 4 scrambling to me. Is that your understanding of it as well?
Yeah, the vast majority of it is, but then there's mid-5th class climbing at the very top, the pitches that we rappelled.
Yeah. But, I mean, you'll see trail runners doing that, although it's not anything to take lightly, in my opinion, because some of those rappels down, those were pretty steep. So glad we had a rail there.
I mean, look at our day from the time that we were at the summit until we got back to the car. Just if you just look at that portion of the day, that gives you a little an idea of how serious and objective it is. It's 13,000 feet tall and it's in the Rockies, so got to worry about lightning and thunder. Not a small feat.
Right. That's the other thing is you're doing 12 pitches of climbing at pretty much above 11,000 feet, 12,000 feet. So it's not like you're run of the mill. I mean, I've never climbed at a crag that's at 11,000 feet with a backpack full of gear and layers and food and all of that stuff, which is probably for me an easy extra 15 pounds or something like that, just with what I had stuffed in my bag. So yeah, it was super tough. So this is a trad climb. It's bolted. Josh led every pitch and I followed. What would be the pertinent equipment that you would say to bring on something like this if someone was going to go on it?
Well, if you're going up there to do the Exum, you're already someone who's done a lot of trad climbing, done a lot of alpine climbing. So you're going to understand kind of what the standard rack looks like. And that is what we brought, except it was slightly beefed up. So we basically brought a standard rack from 0.4 to 3. And then I also brought some doubles from, I think, 0.5, 0.4, and 0.3, and then down to the little tiny ones, I think all the way down to 0.1. So I think I had a total of 11 cams and then 5 stoppers.
And we didn't.
Not when I came back.
Which is not what we came back with, which bring a nut tool. We didn't do that. We didn't do that. So we lost a couple nuts and definitely 1 cam.
Yeah.
That the guys behind us said they were going to grab. But anyway.
Yeah, if you're listening, if you're those guys and you're watching this.
They probably are, because this is a very popular podcast.
Right. Well, yeah, so I brought a standard rack plus some extra in the smaller sizes. And then I brought 14 single slings for extending those and slinging horns, etc. which I think is pretty great what we brought.
Yeah, and then we brought a 50-meter Beal Opera rope, which was the skinnier rope.
Yeah.
And
Well, it's also a little on the shorter end too. We would want a 60.
yeah. Yeah, which you'll hear about a little bit later when we talk about the rappels. It was not long enough for the rappels. It was long enough for all the climbing we pretty much did, I would say.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
for the climbing, it was great, but for the rappels, it wasn't. Anyway, so rest of the equipment, standard layering system, although Josh forgot his layer, and I heard about
This
this.
wing layer would have been nice.
Yeah. Yeah. So definitely bring your layers up there. We brought pants, shorts, hat, helmet, all of that stuff that you would need if pretty much if you were doing a 14er in Colorado is what I would say is basically what you would typically bring. Now, our game plan. Now, we found a couple resources that were super, super critical. And that was,
There was some like whiskey river or something
oh,
website.
yeah. I
Yeah.
actually personally hated that one. It was way too, you're right. It was just it was sensory overload with how much information they gave you. And I would frequently get lost in the text.
Yeah, it was a little TMI. I think if you had like a ton of time to really go through, you could kind of decipher what was relevant to you on your route and what wasn't relevant. But generally, there was just way too much information because it was covering more than just the upper X or the full Exum. The information we found to be most useful was the Steph A bags right up on it. So that's what we used because Steph on her report actually got off route a couple of times trying to get on the first pitch. And so
Mhm.
because of that, it was pretty well documented and we were able to kind of follow what she did wrong and go just right to it, right to the start of the route. So
It
that
was
set us off real well for the rest of the day.
it was so perfect because Josh and I were talking about this and we said essentially we there really can't be any mistake blunders on this. We really can't. We're not afforded very many mistakes on this route because of the fact that it's a very super long route. I mean, it was 17 miles over 7,000 feet of vert. You're doing like 2,000 feet of climbing, and a lot of that is flow terrain, even when you're just on the trail, which we'll talk about in a second here. And so we felt as though we couldn't really make any real big blunders or mistakes. So we really studied Steph Abeg's report really well. Screenshots, pictures, all of that type of stuff. And we had no problem finding that start, which we thought could be very difficult. So
Yeah, that's widely regarded. The crux of the route is finding it. So glad we knocked that out early.
which is crazy because I didn't feel like that was the crook as you'll hear in a second here. But I know it's like maybe that lulled us into this sense of, oh, all right, now we just have to climb. Real easy climbing, right? But anyway, how Josh and I got to Teton National Park is obviously we drove from Laramie. So Josh flew in, picked him up. We've done a whole bunch of other stuff before that, but then we drove to the national park. We chilled there for a little bit, and then we tried figuring out where we were going to camp. And we met the visitor center girl, and she says, "Oh, there's these dispersed places," acting like there's like a million thousand spots, right? And so we roll up there, and there is no place. All of them are taken, and this is a Monday during the week. So God forbid what it would look like on the weekend. Now, what happened next?
I think we were just starting to get ready to like set up the tent and then thunderstorm blows in and lightning strikes all over the place. Starts
All
pouring
over
down
the
rain
place.
while we were filming your other video for the cold soaked mountain house meal. And then so we go hunker down inside and kind of wait out the storm and eventually passes.
And then Josh pulls "You want me to sleep in the thunderstorms with bears around?"
I think it was like I'm just like, well, obviously I'm gonna sleep in the car because we're in grizzly country. There's a lightning storm outside. There's literally a river in the road behind us from all the rain. And and we're illegally camping on the side of the road.
Yeah.
Minor
So
detail.
anyway, I told Josh he couldn't sleep in the car with me, and I made him sleep in the tent. I'm just kidding. No, I felt bad, so I let Josh sleep in the car with me. But this actually worked out pretty well because what we ended up doing was a little stealth camping. And as it got toward evening, we actually just pulled into a dispersed camp spot next to all these people and then just acted like we were the friends of maybe someone that is also camping there that had a tent. And then we just slept in our car. And it was great. Yeah.
It
So
worked. Yep.
yeah, it worked. So that's something that you could do. So obviously we had a huge alpine start. We were up by 12:30 or something like that, and we were basically starting the route by 1:45 a.m. And how do you feel about that start? The time?
Good. It was a good time. I think it was perfect. I think it was perfect.
If
Well, I
we
mean,
would have made any mistakes, we would have been coming out in the dark.
yeah, I think that's what I was going to say. If it was a normal Rockies day with the thunderstorms coming in the early afternoon, that would have been a problem. We would have had to, we would have had to
Yeah.
bail off the route. But we were keeping track of that, and we had the option of bailing out, before the upper Exum if we needed to. But there was no building thunderstorms in the distance, so we got lucky on that. We totally nailed the weather. It was cooperating with us for sure.
Yeah. Because as you'll hear, we ended up summoning around 1:30 actually. So about 12 hours later, right?
Hmm.
Yeah,
Hmm.
that's what it was. So that's actually prime thunderstorm time kind of in the Rockies at some point. So maybe people might want to start a little bit earlier than what we did, but for us it worked out pretty well.
Yeah.
The
Well,
one
we're
thing
doing it in a day though, too. Most people probably aren't going to do it in 2 or 3 days, but since you're going to start, so early in the morning, you're doing it in a single day. That's kind of what you're left with. You don't have many other options.
uh, now the first few miles of the trail super breezy, easy coaster, easy trail, no rocks. I even made the comment that this is a really nice trail. And then you eventually get to these giant boulder fields. These were huge boulders too, some of these. I can't believe that we did some of these in the dark under headlamp, by the way, when we were coming down. That is something to take note of. Basically, I mean, what, 2 miles from the saddle, it's boulders and loose rocks and just rocks, stuff like that, I would say.
Lots of rocks. Yep.
Yeah.
Some of those are like big as your apartment here.
Yeah, absolutely huge, and you're kinda scaling them and going around them and stuff like that, and obviously, it's in the dark if you're doing it car to car, so and I guess if you're camping at that one platform there as well. So that was interesting, so be aware of that's gonna be slow. Now, we eventually got to the lower saddle, which is where it started to get cold. That was when I'd started layering,
Mhm.
and that's kinda your first hint of getting into the cold, and from there, we traversed over, found the start next to that big cairn, and we started pitch number 1. So what did you think of pitch number 1, Josh?
Well, pitch number one is the chimney. And looking at it from below, I thought it was going to be just cruiser and pretty easy, but it felt pretty full on right away. Felt a little more exposed than I was expecting, and the rock is very different than what I'm used to.
Very different.
Very solid compared to a lot of the Cascades rock. So that was cool, but it was definitely some engaged climbing. You definitely had to pay attention. It wasn't just like cruiser fly up sort of 5, 6. Don't have to think about it. Definitely had to be careful and pick through it and be very focused on what you're doing.
That's a great way to describe it. Not you had to be engaged, very engaged. And I think
Hmm.
when we obviously when we found the start super easily, I think for me, I was like, okay, heck yeah, like we're just gonna do some easier climbing. It's gonna be pretty chill. That is not the case at all. How I felt.
Hmm.
Now, and to also put it into context, it's freaking cold. So that's those first few pitches aren't getting any sun. And even when it's 9:30, 10 o'clock, I mean, they're not getting any sun. And so your hands are totally numb going on this rock. The rock's sharp, the rock's cold. So pitch one was pretty full on right away. So when I got to the top of pitch one, I looked at Josh and Josh looked at me. Oh, and I'll never forget it. And that's when we both kind of just nodded and we're like, okay, this this is a little bit of a stiff 5-6, I think.
Hmm. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So don't let that 5-6 rating get to you. So now we had pitch 2 and 3. What did you think of those?
I don't remember much of pitch 2 through 5, to be honest with you. I just because pitch or pitch 2 through 4, that is, because pitch 5 was so memorable that I'm just kind of like, I mean, it just kind of went blank from 2 to 5, but it was all of it was engaging. I do remember that. None of it was just like a gimme super easy pitch. And it's because it's exposed, because it's cold, because we're in backpacks, because we're at, 12,000 feet.
100%.
So like, and because there isn't like, there's not any tat on the route. There's like maybe a piton here and there. It's not like super clear where to go. So you got to put a lot of energy into route finding. So there's just a lot to it.
Totally. Totally. Yeah, again, great point. Wearing backpacks, it's cold, it's windy too. The wind was coming, exposed. So a lot of stuff that you had to contend with. Yeah. So the lower Exum was pretty freaking full on. Oh, also crack. There was some crack climbing, stemming. This was a full body movement of climbing that I've never experienced before, climbing at a crag. I mean, I was wedging, jamming, cramming everything into a crevice to get up somewhere. And so it was very different climbing to me as well. Yeah.
Yeah, got a lot of variety, a little bit of everything on that route.
Yeah. How'd you feel belaying? How cold were you?
I was shivering, man. I was shivering. I was wearing a puffy jacket, but I was still cold. That's why I was saying I wish I brought my windbreaker because I could
Yeah.
at least cut the wind. But if I could go back, I'd probably bring just another insulated layer so I could double up on it because I was definitely cold belaying.
Yeah. Shivering is the correct word. I was literally shaking. Yeah. Just haven't done that in a while. Yeah, super cold. And we read that one trip report where the guy said that he's been to Denali and other very, very cold places. And he's
Yeah.
like, I have never been as cold as I was on this rock for whatever reason. Yeah. Now, so that led us into the upper Exum route. And when Josh told me that we were getting up to Wall Street, the next pitch was Wall Street, I was pretty much elated at that point. And that was, upper Exum was in full sun, which was great. So it was super warm at that point. And the upper XM, we did not. The only thing we pitched out was properly was the friction pitch, is what I believe we identified it as. The rest of the climbing, I think Josh talks about or calls it short roping. Josh short roped me up, or Josh would solo, or we did some solo moves as well that I wasn't that excited of myself. What else am I missing about the upper XM?
I mean, that's pretty much it. We use, a variety of different techniques to get up there. Like you said, we pitched out that one pitch, did some short roping, we did some short pitching
Mhm.
where, we're still pitching it out, or we have like half of the rope stowed and we're only using a portion of the rope. Because there's a lot of ledges and a lot of like walking. It's definitely not all climbing. So you can do a lot of it pretty efficiently without pitching out using the entire rope. If we had done that, it would have slowed us down. There would have been a lot of rope drag. The communication between us would have been more challenging because we'd be further apart. And so we eliminate all those things by staying close together. And I do remember a lot of like walking and then there'd be like a boulder problem. And, maybe that boulder problem like is pretty hard. Like, maybe it's a V1 or a V2, pretty hard relative to the rest of the route. But, there's a trail basically right underneath you. So it just feels like walking and then another boulder problem. That's more walking and then another boulder problem. But we didn't talk about the best part, dude. We didn't talk about the black face.
Blackface, which was
The
pitch
crux pitch.
5.
Yeah, pitch 5.
Yeah, talk to me about the blackface.
And I think that was the thing so it was finding the start of the route was the number one like concern. And then climbing the black face was the next one because that's the crux of the route. And it delivered. It was awesome. It was definitely stiff for a 5.7. I think it's pretty sandbagged, but it was super engaging, really exposed, super fun. You could just kind of like pick through it, find like just the right weakness, the perfect weakness through the route. But it had thin gear. It was all good gear, but it was thin. Lots of crimpers, lots of small foothold, but really solid rock, really exposed, just super fun. I think that was definitely my favorite pitch, even though it was kind of scary. It was definitely my favorite pitch.
Yeah, Josh freaking killed that. I was terrified on that thing. Wide open space. I just wasn't looking down because I knew there was so much air underneath me. Pretty crazy. So, and then when I got up to the top, I was like, dude, I can't believe you led that. I just can't believe it. So Josh did a really, really good job. And yeah, that was one thing too about the more technical climbing on this route. Man, there was always such really, for the most part, there was really big juggy holds, I kind of thought. I never really had to crimp too much. Never, I always was telling Josh, as long as I got a good foot and I would go up on my foot when I didn't see any holds, all of a sudden you just reach for one and boom, there it was. It was usually a pretty bomber hold. And that was really cool about it too.
Yeah, I think generally the entire route was just like it was very solid, and you always had a hold where you needed it. I think that's just those sorts of
Yeah.
things kind of make it, what it is, a well-known North American classic climb.
Mhm.
It's because it's just so good.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. We summited then at about 1:30, and when we got up there, we met 2 other guys that actually knew where the 2 rappels were going down Owen Spalding, and so we decided we wanted to stick with them because we had bait on where the wraps were, but, it's always better to go with someone that obviously knows
Yeah.
how to get there and get it down. We're gonna go a lot faster. We also met the gentleman that has been setting the FKTs all over the world at Denali and Hood. I don't even remember his name actually, but he was just training for the Teton. So I think he's gonna try to attempt that very soon. So first wrap that we have off the summit was super easy. No problem at all. We used our 50-meter rope, no problem. By the way, the wraps are in great condition. I hear the National Forest Service goes up there and kind of maintains them. So that they were really good. We get to the second, and we had talked with these gentlemen before, and they were like, "Dude, your 50-meter rope is not gonna make it to the end of this rappel." So they left their rope there, waited for us, and we wrapped down that, no problem. How long of a rope would you say you would need for that?
Yeah, a 60-meter rope would do it. But we knew that our 50 wasn't going to work from the beginning. That's just the rope we had. It's either that or use the 10.8. But it would have been fine had we not had that, because we could do a Reachner or whatever. There's definitely always a way, but you might as well. There's somebody down there who's willing to let you use the rope. You might as well use it.
This little paper thin green rope that I was like, "Oh my man, you're telling me that was a pretty exposed wrap too." Yeah, it was fine. Just another day, just another day at the job for Josh.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the descent after the 2 wraps, because essentially I kind of thought that we would be, down to the saddle in an hour or something like that. And it actually took significantly longer to get to the saddle than what I thought it was. How would you describe the descent after that second rappel? And give me your quote that you said.
I don't know. I remember being involved. I don't remember what the quote was, but it was definitely involved. It was definitely technical, definitely like taxing. There's a lot of class 4 down scrambling and a lot of like loose talus to descend. So it's definitely not trivial. You're engaged the whole time. So I mean, you're very engaged from the time you step foot on the route all the way until you get back down to the saddle. And then you get a little bit of a break, but then you're into the boulder
100%.
field. So it's just like the only
100%.
time you're not engaged is when you're on the trail down to
At
the lakes.
4 miles back down to the lake. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great point. Yeah, you are literally mentally engaged from the time you step on that freaking first pitch to all the way down to that lower saddle. But then not, you don't have to be engaged to the point of fearing for your safety. After the saddle, it's more of just mentally crushing boulders that go so slow that you're trying to scramble over. But yeah, what you said, Josh, was there was this fourth class move on the down climb. God, I just wish we would stop having a fourth class move or something like that, you said.
Uh-huh.
And I'm like, I know, man. Like every time you thought it was gonna be done, you're just like, God, I gotta do another kind of little spicy move here every single time until you got down to that lower saddle. So don't let up there. Yeah, then we had giant boulder field to recross again. And eventually we ended up finishing, it was right before 8 p.m., I believe. I think it was 7:50
Yeah.
or something.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Right.
About right.
So
Yeah.
we did an 18-hour day, just as Chad said on the video that Josh has before. 18 hours. It was an 18-hour day. And yeah, how did you feel at the end of that whole thing? Maybe not exactly at the end, but maybe like the next day when you actually had good sleep. What did you think about the whole thing?
Well, man, I felt pretty good. I mean, generally, I felt, and I knew this going in, and I was going to feel really good about accomplishing that because it's a big objective. It's a huge day. It's a grade 4. We're doing it car to car. We've never done it before. We're flying in from another state, not familiar with the rock, not familiar with the mountains. Having to deal with the time crunch of the thunder, lightning, and all that. So I was very psyched to be able to pull that off without any problems happening. We didn't get lost. There was no drama. We just knocked it out. So that's kind of like the overwhelming feeling I felt afterwards. As far as like physically, it was pretty good. I mean, I did a grade 4, the weekend before, and I did a grade 4 the weekend before that as well. So I definitely felt like physically ready for it. And that was kind of confirmed doing it because I feel, pretty good, the next day after doing it.
Mhm.
What about you?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. We kind of talked about it before we went on the route, which was you were like, "Oh, I'm pretty stoked, dude. This is gonna be like a big day for you." And I definitely felt as though that it has been a breakthrough for my climbing. Like this was the most significant. This was the hardest climbing that I've done, just consecutively with a pack at altitude. Big day, grade 4 day, mileage, down climb, wraps. I mean, it like literally had everything. And our favorite quote was like at by the end of it, you felt like you were wrestling a slightly weaker man for the entire day. And that's just kind of how it felt. And you're just kind of that low level fatigue. But yeah, I felt really good, man. And was there was no shenanigans with this. Josh and I did a route in El Dorado Canyon called Icarus. And we were before we go up there, I'm like, how much water should I bring? Josh's like, well, it's gonna be 3 pitches, kind of a short of approach. Dude, we were out there for how many hours? I don't even know how many hours.
I don't
We
know,
did like
but
7 pitches. We kinda got off route, we wrapped out, we did anyway, it was a big day, there was a lot of shenanigans, and going into this one, we did our research, we freaking nailed it. Josh crushed the leads, and I just hung in there, and, it was a great day, dude. It was my first alpine climb and something I wanna do more of for sure.
yeah, it was a good shakedown. Good. It was good prep for the grand,
Mhm.
and definitely
Aldo,
way more
man.
shenanigans. Yep.
Way more shenanigans, which again, we said you can't really have if you're doing a car to car in this and you're trying to beat thunderstorms and or get back before dark. Yeah, it's just like
Yeah.
you can't really have that. So, what's the next alpine objective?
What is the next alpine objective? Well, this coming weekend, Longs Peak.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yep.
So we're gonna. So Josh is visiting me, obviously, and so we're gonna go meet up with some people and do. We're gonna go mob on Long's Peak, five
Yeah,
deep,
5 of us. Yep.
5 deep, the bros. It's gonna be just a friggin' huge mob. So yeah, that's gonna be cool. In the 14 or so. Yeah. Any closing remarks on this?
On the grand, the thing that popped into my head was when we started, how ambitious our plan was. We were gonna do the grand, we were gonna do Owen, we were gonna do Moran, and then we were gonna go do Gannett. And we
Unreal.
were yeah, and we were even talking about, like, what are we gonna do with the leftover time after we have all that? But we ended up just scaling it down a lot just because I mean, we just didn't feel like it. Just didn't sound fun.
Just didn't feel like it. Plus the weather
Yeah.
over there was sucky too.
Yeah.
But dude, after an 18-hour day of climbing, I didn't want to see a rock the
Yeah,
next
exactly.
24 hours for
Yep.
goddamn sure. I mean, I did not want to see any rock. And we didn't. We just went to a coffee shop in Jackson and did social media work and then drove home 6.5 hours yeah, the next day. But yeah, we got on some rock today, but it was way more chill. No backpack
Yep.
carrying either.